Hello folks, welcome to this session on the book Unfiltered, the CEO and the Coach. The book that has just been released, so please go out and buy it at your nearest bookstores, and you can order it online on Amazon and Flipkart. In this session, I have the authors Saurabh Mukherjea, founder and CIO at Marcellus, and Anna Lueneburger, executive leadership coach. Saurabh, Anna, welcome to this session.
Thank you.
Saurabh, I'll start with you. I know that you've seen a major transformation as a leader,
Right.
and in Unfiltered, Anna also writes about how your core values have changed. So let's start from there. From your own experience, tell us about leadership and values, how they are linked.
So look, I think, to be honest, if you had asked me that question 6 years ago, Anupam, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. I had no idea that there was something called values in leadership. Till 6 years ago, my thinking was the leader's job is to basically flog performance out of a team, generate as much profit as possible. I'd grown up reading books on people like Jack Welch, and I'd sort of very much grown up with American capitalism seared into my psyche. It took a few things. It took a few setbacks in my erstwhile job. It took feedback from one of the world's largest executive search firms to say that, look, there are a few things you need to work on. Your temper, your moodiness, your low emotional quotient to begin with. And they recommended that I work with Anna as a coach. I assessed two coaches in London, one American lady and Anna. And I decided to go with Anna because I thought she'd give me less homework. She gave me lots of homework, but as part of that journey with Anna, the journey which is covered in Unfiltered and Anupam, as part of the journey, I realized that there's far more to leadership than beating performance out of a team. For example, leadership also means understanding when to go fast, when to go slow, to understand what the temperature of the team is like, which elements, which team members need emotional support, what sort of emotional support do they need, how do you groom the next generation of leaders. So there are many nuances to building a great business. Most of us grew up in India thinking a great business is about making loads of money, right? And as you get older, in my case, as I hit 40, I realized that there are many other aspects to leadership, such as values around empathy, around emotional connect with the team, and the more you build businesses around that, the stronger the business becomes, the more resilient it becomes, and you as a leader actually give yourselves a far greater growth runway than if you just flog people into performance.
Anna, in chapter 5 of Unfiltered, you've spoken about the strengths assessment framework that you use to assess Saurabh. Can you talk about the framework, how it operates, and how you use that framework to track Saurabh?
Yeah, so my coaching philosophy is actually founded on a strengths-based philosophy, and it comes from a positive psychology background. And strengths are really, sometimes we think strengths are something we're good at, but strengths is something where we're good at, and we also see quick learning curves. And so any leader that I work with, I ask them to take that assessment that's out there free, coming out of the University of Pennsylvania, founded by Marty Seligman, one of the core founders of positive psychology. And Saurabh did the same. So he took that assessment, and there are 24 character strengths or values that emerged from the extensive research that they've done. And the idea or the philosophy is really to understand what are my signature strengths, my top strengths, and how can I use them more effectively in a wider sphere? How can I look at what are strengths that I'm overusing, underusing, and sort of also understand that maybe there are middle strengths that we can also draw on, right? So Saurabh, when we looked at his change journey, we had his original strengths assessment from 2017. And then we were able to compare it 5 years down the line. What does it actually look like today? And it was really interesting to see how some significant changes happened in some of his strengths, right? So for example, hope, which was on place number 20, that came in number 1 in 5 years later. And I think that's a significant shift, and also supports sort of the transformative experience that he describes in the book, right? And then also curiosity, remember, that's one of your signature strengths, right? Being curious.
Interestingly, this happened over 5 years. At any point in time, if you'd asked me, are you becoming more hopeful? I would have said, no, not really. But that's the magic of coaching, right? If you learn from a coach gradually, you start absorbing new values, new behaviors, and then they gradually become second nature. nature.
Saurabh, in chapter 3 of Unfiltered, you've written about how you resisted the idea of working with a coach. And Gurcharan Das, in his endorsement of Unfiltered, which is, there, and he's one of my favorite authors, talks about there being too many command and control leaders. Why do you think so many CEOs tend to be opposed to this idea of taking external help?
I think there's 3 different dimensions to it. The first is most people, CEOs included, hate to admit that they've been doing something less than perfect. A CEO, by definition, most of them see themselves as epitomes of perfection, and to be told that you need a coach means, hey, there's something wrong with me. Second is, even if you admit there's something wrong with you, there's a lot of hard work involved in getting it right. Typically, CEOs, as it is, have plenty on their plate to work on behavioral changes, to work on new skills. Is tough, right? It's an extra load on your schedule. And the third, I think, is just the discomfort of leaving the familiar behind, right? Whenever you leave what you were accustomed to, what the accustomed drill is, and there's a certain cycle through which all of us get accustomed to running businesses, budgeting, performance management, and so on. When you leave the old behind, you don't know what the new will bring, what are the risks involved, what are the pitfalls involved, and therefore it's like a bit like jumping into the void. So it does take a bit of courage. I remember that first 6 months of that, I was a lot of work, right? It was every fortnight we would spend 3 hours. There would be homework assignments, plenty of reading. There'd be practical tasks I would have to go off to do. So it took to a degree of nudging from my erstwhile employer. I'm very glad they did that. Took a degree of nudging from them and a bit of nudging from Anna and help from Anna to pull it off. But I'm glad I went through that journey.
Right. And Anna, in chapter 2 of Unfiltered, you talk about how quickly you clocked, you saw that Saurabh was somewhat reticent about the idea of executive coaching. So how did you go past this initial obstacle and build a relationship with him? It must have been tough, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was, it was clear that there was some hesitation, right, when we first met over Zoom.
It wasn't clear to me, but it was clear to I thought I was hiding it really well.
Yeah.
And so it's not unusual, as Saurabh said, right, that there is a certain hesitation to go into this, what we call the black box of coaching, right? Because it's a confidential conversation. Yes, there are some bits and pieces that are known to the world about coaching, but nobody really understands what it feels like. And in fact, essentially, that was why we wrote the book, because we wanted to bring people into the room and say, this is, if you want to, test drive coaching, here's an opportunity for you to do so, right? And motivation is so critical for the success of coaching. Of course, the coach needs to be qualified and there needs to be chemistry between the two, but the motivation of the client is important. I think coaching, the industry is changing and the perception is changing. So rather than looking at it from we're fixing someone, it's really we're taking top talent and we're investing in the top talent. And so I think there are elements of that maybe you also saw at the time, right? Because they were clearly investing in your career.
Yeah.
And then when we had this conversation, I could also sense that, of course, curiosity, as I mentioned earlier, is one of his core traits. And if someone's very curious, that's super helpful for the coaching journey, because the curiosity not just goes outwards, but also inwards and understanding more about ourselves. So that's essentially, I think, that with a mix of us having actually good connection gave me confidence that this would be a very interesting and good engagement.
Interesting, the construct of coaching in sports increasingly is now well accepted in corporate life. And I think Unfiltered is part of that journey, helping leaders and CEOs all across the world understand that if top tennis players and top cricketers can successfully get coached and become better at their trade, well, why can't we?
Yep. Anna, tell us about the coaching process and how trust is central to this relationship between coach and client.
Yeah, so I think you said the critical word, relationship, right? When we look at coaching processes and what's known out there, we look often at what's the structure, how often do you meet, what are the tools that you're using, what are the resources, what are the assessments that go into it, right? But in the end, what makes coaching really successful, it hinges on the strength of the relationship that coach and client are able to build. It's really as simple as that and as complex as that, right? And trust obviously is a key ingredient to building a strong relationship. So that is something that we always work on, and we really as coaches, or I can maybe just speak about myself, I as a coach, really look at how can I create a safe, non-judgmental environment where the client feels safe to bring their thoughts, their emotions, their experiences to the table. So we really can unpack it, and he or she can then experiment with different behaviors in that safe space, right? And coaching is confidential. So that adds also to the trust element. When the coach and the client maintain that confidentiality, or particularly the coach, then that also creates more trust in the relationship.